beneath one of the most contested pieces of real estate on earth, a walled hilltop in Jerusalem's Old City. Sacred to three world religions lies a mystery archaeologists have never been allowed to fully investigate. According to the Hebrew Bible, roughly 3,000 years ago, King Solomon built a temple here so magnificent it took 7 years, tens of thousands of laborers, and imported cedar from Lebanon to complete. It housed, according to the text, the Ark of the Covenant itself. For nearly 4 centuries it stood as the spiritual center of ancient Israel, until Babylonian soldiers burned it to the ground in 586 BCE. But here's the problem. No archaeologist has ever excavated the site where the temple is believed to have stood. Not one stone confirmed to be from Solomon's temple has ever been dug up and identified with certainty. So the question this documentary sets out to examine is a real, unresolved one in modern scholarship. Did Solomon's temple really exist? And if it did, what can we actually prove? What does the Bible actually say? Before assessing the evidence, it helps to know precisely what claim we're testing. The primary biblical description comes from 1 Kings, chapters 6 through 8, with a parallel, somewhat expanded account in 2 Chronicles 3 through 5. According to these texts, construction began in the 4th year of Solomon's reign, using cedar and cypress timber supplied by Hiram, king of Tyre, along with skilled Phoenician craftsmen. The structure is described as relatively modest in footprint by modern standards, roughly 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 45 feet high, using ancient cubit measurements but lavishly decorated, with interior walls overlaid in gold, carved cherubim, and a 3-part floor plan, an entrance porch, a main hall, and an innermost chamber called the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant was said to rest beneath the outstretched wings of 2 large golden cherubim. The text describes an enormous labor force. 1 Kings 5 mentions a levy of forced laborers alongside skilled stonemasons and lavish quantities of gold, bronze, and imported materials, including 2 massive freestanding bronze pillars at the entrance, named Yakin and Boaz. It's worth being precise here. This is a textual description, written down in the form we now possess considerably later than Solomon's traditional 10th century BCE reign, most likely compiled and edited over subsequent centuries. That gap between the events described and the text's final written form is itself one of the central issues scholars debate, and it's where our investigation properly begins. Did Solomon even exist? Before we can ask whether his temple existed, historians have to ask a more basic question. Is there solid evidence? Solomon himself was a real historical figure, ruling a real, centralized kingdom capable of a project this size. This is where modern biblical archaeology gets genuinely contentious. For much of the 20th century, scholars generally accepted the biblical narrative of a powerful united monarchy under Kings Saul, David, and Solomon largely at face value. That consensus broke down significantly starting in the 1990s and 2000s. Archaeologist Israel Finkelstein of Tel Aviv University, he became the leading proponent of what's often called the low chronology, a reassessment of the dating of key archaeological layers at sites like Megiddo, Hazor, and Gizar, cities the Bible explicitly credits Solomon with fortifying 1 Kings 9:15. Finkelstein and co-author Neil Asher Silberman, in their influential and widely read book, The Bible Unearthed, argued that the monumental architecture, long attributed to Solomon's 10th century BCE reign, actually dates to roughly a century later, under the northern kingdom of Israel, meaning, in this view, David and Solomon's kingdom was a much smaller, less centralized chiefdom than the biblical account describes, not the powerful empire-scale monarchy 1 Kings portrays. Other scholars, including William G. Dever, a prominent American archaeologist, have pushed back against the more skeptical end of this low chronology, arguing there is still solid archaeological evidence for a real, organized state-level entity in the 10th century BCE, even if its scale was smaller and its capital, Jerusalem, less monumental than the biblical text later suggests. This remains a live, ongoing academic debate, not a settled matter. An honest treatment of this topic requires acknowledging that scholars using the same excavated data reach different conclusions about dating and scale. What's important is this: the question, did Solomon exist? And the question, was Solomon's kingdom as vast and wealthy as the Bible describes are two separate questions, and most mainstream historians today, across the spectrum of the debate, accept some version of a real historical Solomon and a real, if debated in scale, Israelite kingdom in this period. Where is the temple, and why hasn't anyone dug it up? Here's the central archaeological obstacle this entire investigation runs into. The site, traditionally identified as the location of Solomon's temple, is the Temple Mount, known in Arabic as Haram al-Sharif, a roughly 35-acre platform in Jerusalem's Old City that is also home to the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, among the holiest sites in Islam, because of the site's active religious significance to both Judaism and Islam, and the extraordinary political sensitivity surrounding it. Comprehensive archaeological excavation of the Temple Mount platform itself has never been permitted in the modern era. This isn't a matter of archaeologists lacking interest, it's one of the most sought-after excavation sites in the world. It's a matter of religious preservation and geopolitical reality. This means that, unlike most major archaeological questions, this one cannot be resolved through direct excavation of the most likely site. Everything, scholars know, or infer, comes from indirect evidence. Crifts excavations around the Temple Mounts, retaining walls and adjacent areas such as the Ophel, the area just south of the Mount, ancient historical texts, comparative archaeology from similar structures elsewhere in the region, and careful re-examination of older excavation records and artifacts that surfaced before modern restrictions tightened. Is there any direct physical evidence at all? This is probably the question viewers most want answered, and their honest answer is nuanced. There is no confirmed physical remnant of Solomon's temple structure itself, but there is a body of surrounding, indirect evidence worth examining carefully. In 2013, archaeologist Eilat Mazar, excavating in the Ophel area just south of the Temple Mount, uncovered a large public building complex, including massive fortifications and a monumental gatehouse, which he dated to the 10th century BCE, the traditional period of Solomon's reign. Alongside this, her team recovered large storage jars called pitoy bearing inscriptions and a cache of gold and silver items. Mazar herself argued this represented evidence of significant royal building activity in Jerusalem during Solomon's traditional era, though consistent with the broader dating debate discussed in the previous segment. Not all archaeologists agree with her 10th century dating, or her attribution of the complex specifically to Solomon. Separately, in 2012, Mazar's team found a fragment of a large ceramic vessel with a partial inscription believed to include an early form of the name Yerubbaal, a name associated with the biblical judge Gideon, dated to a similar period evidence. Some scholars argue for widespread literacy and organized administration in the region earlier than some minimalist scholars previously assumed, though this too remains debated regarding its precise significance. It's important to state plainly, none of these finds are the temple itself, and no artifact has been recovered that can be directly, uncontroversially linked to Solomon's temple structure. What they represent is evidence of organized, monumental construction activity in Jerusalem during a period consistent with the traditional dating of Solomon's reign, supporting evidence for the plausibility of the broader biblical claim, not direct confirmation of it. What about the House of David's inscription? One of most significant archaeological discoveries relevant to this whole question isn't from Jerusalem at all. It's from Tel Dan, in northern Israel. In 1993, archaeologist Avraham Byram and his team discovered a fragment of a black basalt, stele inscribed victory monument at Tel Dan. Dated by most scholars to the 9th century BCE, roughly a century after Solomon's traditional reign, the inscription, written in Aramaic by a rival king, boasting of military victories over Israel and Judah, contains the phrase, Bitwid, widely translated by scholars as House of David. This discovery mattered enormously because it was at the time the first archaeological evidence outside the Bible itself, directly referencing King David as the founder of a royal dynasty, confirming that a House of David was, at minimum, a recognized political entity known to Israel's neighbors. Within roughly a century of David's traditional reign, this significantly strengthened the case that David was a real historical figure, not a purely legendary later invention, a conclusion accepted today by the large majority of scholars, including many who remain skeptical of the Bible's more expansive claims about Solomon's kingdom's size and wealth. It doesn't prove the temple existed, but it does provide independent, non-biblical evidence for the historical reality of the royal dynasty. The Bible credits with building it, an important, if indirect, piece of the puzzle. Did ancient temples like this actually exist elsewhere? One of the more compelling lines of evidence isn't from Jerusalem at all, but from a temple discovered roughly 500 miles north, in northern Syria at the Andar Temple. Excavated beginning in the 1950s and studied extensively since, dates to roughly the same general era, with construction estimates ranging from the 13th to 10th centuries BCE, in a widely cited 2000 article in Biblical Archaeology Review. Biblical scholar John Monson documented striking architectural parallels between the Andara Temple and the biblical description of Solomon's Temple. A similar three-room floor plan porch, main hall, and inner sanctuary, similar overall proportions, and comparable decorative motifs, including carved winged figures. This matters for two reasons. First, it demonstrates that the architectural style described in 1 Kings 6 wasn't an implausible literary invention. It matches a real, well-attested regional temple building tradition of the era, lending credibility to the biblical description as a reflecting authentic period architectural knowledge, whenever exactly the text was finally composed or edited. Second, it gives scholars a physical, excavatable proxy for understanding what a structure like Solomon's Temple may have actually looked like, since the real site remains inaccessible. The Andara Temple was itself unfortunately damaged during the Syrian civil war, in airstrikes reported in 2018, a loss that underscores how fragile and irreplaceable this kind of comparative archaeological evidence is. Do we have any record of the temple's destruction? Here the evidence becomes considerably stronger, because we're dealing with a later, better documented period of history, according to 2 Kings 25 and Jeremiah 52. The Babylonian army under King Nebuchadnezzar II besieged and captured Jerusalem, destroying the temple. In 586 BCE, some scholars place it in 587 BCE, depending on calendar reconstruction, as part of a broader Babylonian conquest of the Kingdom of Judah. This event has substantial, independent, non-biblical corroboration. The Babylonian Chronicles cuneiform tablets housed today in the British Museum, part of an ongoing series of official Babylonian court records, document Nebuchadnezzar's military campaigns against Jerusalem, including an earlier capture of the city in 597 BCE, matching the biblical account's general chronology closely. Archaeological excavations throughout Jerusalem's City of David area have uncovered clear, widespread destruction layers dated to this period. Ash deposits, collapsed structures, and arrowheads consistent with a violent military conquest, providing solid physical confirmation that a major destruction event did occur in Jerusalem at approximately this time. So while the temple structure itself has never been excavated, the broader historical event of Jerusalem's Babylonian destruction, the event the Bible says ended the first temple's existence, is one of the better attested events in the entire narrative, supported by multiple independent lines of evidence. What happened to the temple's treasures, including the Ark of the Covenant? This is probably the single most popular myth-generating question surrounding this topic, and it's worth addressing directly and carefully. The biblical record itself becomes notably vague at exactly this point. 2 Kings 25 to 13:17 describes Babylonian soldiers dismantling and carrying off major bronze temple furnishings, but conspicuously does not mention the Ark of the Covenant at all, despite mentioning other items in some detail. This textual silence is precisely what has fueled centuries of speculation. Numerous traditions have developed to fill this gap. To Maccabees, a Jewish text from the intertestamental period, claims the prophet Jeremiah hid the Ark in a cave on Mount Nebo before the destruction. Ethiopian Orthodox Christian tradition holds the Ark was taken to Ethiopia by Menelik, said to be the son of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, and remains today in the town of Axum, guarded by a single monk, who alone may view it. Other popular theories, including some associated with fringe treasure hunting expeditions, Freemasonry-linked legends, and various speculative claims tied to the Knights Templar proposed the Ark or temple treasures were hidden beneath the Temple Mount itself, or transported to locations ranging from Ireland to the southwestern United States. It's important, in the interest of accuracy, To state clearly, none of these traditions have any confirmed archaeological or documentary evidence supporting them. They are, without exception, later traditions, devotional, legendary, or speculative, arising centuries after the temple's destruction, not independently verified historical claims. The honest scholarly answer to what happened to the Ark of the Covenant is that we do not know, and the historical record simply does not tell us. Was there ever a second temple? And is that the Wailing Wall we see today? This is a genuinely common point of public confusion worth clarifying directly. Following the Babylonian exile, Persian King Cyrus the Great permitted Jewish exiles to return and rebuild the temple. According to Ezra 1, and corroborated broadly by the Cyrus cylinder, a Babylonian cuneiform artifact housed in the British Museum, which documents Cyrus's general policy of restoring displaced peoples and their religious institutions after his conquest of Babylon in 539 BCE, though the cylinder does not mention Jerusalem or the Jewish community specifically. It does establish the broader policy pattern the biblical account describes. His second temple, completed around 516 BCE according to Ezra 6, stood for centuries and was massively expanded and reconstructed by King Herod the Great, beginning around 20 BCE. A project so extensive that this Rodiana structure is often what most visitors picture when they imagine the ancient Jewish temple. The Western Wall, visible in Jerusalem today and popularly called the Wailing Wall, is not a remnant of Solomon's original temple at all. It's a retaining wall from Herod's massive platform expansion, supporting the Temple Mount, dating to roughly 19 BCE. This second temple was itself destroyed by Roman forces in 70 CE during the suppression of the First Jewish-Roman War, an event extensively documented by the contemporary historian Josephus in his work The Jewish War. So, to be precise, no standing structure visible in Jerusalem today dates back to Solomon's original 10th century BCE temple. What remains visible is Herodian-era construction, itself roughly 900 years later in Solomon's traditional reign. So what do historians actually agree on? Bringing all of this together, here's a fair summary of where mainstream historical and archaeological scholarship currently stands. Across the range of ongoing academic debate, most historians accept that David and Solomon were likely real historical figures, ruling some form of organized Israelite kingdom centered on Jerusalem in the 10th century. BCEA conclusions strengthened significantly by the Tel Don Stele's independent reference to a House of David. There is genuine unresolved scholarly disagreement about the scale of that kingdom, whether it matches the wealthy, a monumental empire described in 1 Kings, or was a smaller, regionally significant chiefdom. As scholars like Finkelstein argue, based on reassessed archaeological dating, no physical remains of Solomon's temple structure itself have been excavated or confirmed, because the most likely site has never been archaeologically accessible in the modern era. This is a limitation of access, not necessarily evidence against the temple's existence. Indirect evidence: comparative temple architecture from sites like Aindara, monumental Jerusalem area construction from the traditional period, and well-corroborated later events like the Babylonian destruction of 586 BCE is broadly consistent with, though it does not definitively prove, the biblical account. And centuries of popular tradition regarding the temple's lost treasures, particularly the Ark of the Covenant, remain firmly in the category of legend and speculation, rather than documented history. So did Solomon's temple really exist? The most honest answer modern archaeology and history can offer isn't a simple yes or no. It's this: the surrounding historical evidence, a real Davidic dynasty, a plausible regional architectural tradition, a well-documented later destruction, makes the temple's existence entirely plausible and consistent with what we know of the period. But because the one site that could offer definitive proof remains, for deeply understandable religious and political reasons, permanently beyond the reach of the archaeologist's trowel, certainty itself may be something history simply cannot deliver on this particular question. What remains, 3,000 years later, is not an excavated ruin, but a question one still capable, even today, of shaping the religious identity, political disputes, and archaeological imagination of an entire region.